Hello and welcome to my retro mini room. Today we're taking a look at gameplay and unboxing 5 classic GameCube games that are still stuck on the GameCube. If you like this sort of content, please hit that subscribe button and a notification bell to keep up with my latest videos. Please hit the like button to help me with the algorithm. Share it with your friends, especially whether you want to expose somebody to GameCube or if they love GameCube. It'll be fun for them. So let's get started. So just a quick note and recommendations on GameCube hardware. The way I captured gameplay and just how I play my GameCube games, I used my backwards compatible capable Wii console with GameCube hardware in it. And if you have at least component, if not like I do, I have a conversion cable to HDMI. Any and all GameCube games you put in the Wii outputs it at the highest resolution that game is capable of up through progressive scan. So it's a beautiful way to play GameCube games through the Wii. That's actually my favorite thing about the Wii is its backwards compatibility. Now, in terms of using an actual GameCube, unfortunately, unless you already bought it back in the day, the official component cable, to get one now is very expensive. We're talking $100 to $200. And there are unofficial solutions now, but even those are still very expensive, $100+. Also worth noting, it depends on what model of the GameCube you have, because earlier models had component capability, whereas later, to cut costs, they removed that capability. So you have to pay close attention to that if you decided you wanted to invest in one of those official or otherwise cables. So if you already happen to have a Wii that has GameCube hardware, that's going to be the easiest and cheapest bet to play GameCube games at their highest possible fidelity. And finally, the way I capture gameplay for most of my older consoles, I'm using HDMI into the mClassic, which goes into my HDMI divider box into the capture device and TV. That's how I play my games. That's how I capture them. If you're interested in more details about my setup, ways you want to improve your setup, HDMI conversions, and anything like that, let me know in the comments, and maybe that'll be a future video. And to begin our list, we're taking a look at Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem, developed by Silicon Knights and released by Nintendo. Some of my favorite aspects of Eternal Darkness are the soundtrack and atmosphere, which are some of the best I've ever seen in any game to date. The game is an absolute masterclass at setting the tone for the atmosphere and the type of game we're playing here, which is a survival horror. From the dynamic music while navigating the main menu, to the eerie loading screens, and the very eerie mansion that you explore trying to unravel the mystery of the story. Playing this game by yourself in the dark with the volume turned up, or headphones on for that matter, is truly an experience. If you're a fan of Resident Evil, you're going to be right at home here with this survival horror gameplay. Really, really nice graphics, awesome baked in and detailed lighting. The character models look really nice. They're well animated considering they're hand animated, but the environments are what really shine. Along with the fantastic graphics and atmosphere are some of the best voice acting performances I've ever heard in a game. Really tight dialogue, excellent plot. This game is just fantastic with its narrative. There's 3 different endings, lots of replay value. You really do want to play this multiple times to experience all the different ins and outs of the story and get the different endings and the different paths you're able to take in the game, because you have 3 different paths you select, which unlock different elements within the magic system, and there's a 4th and final one you unlock. And speaking of the magic here is really fun, very intuitive and creative. I love the magic system in this. It's a nice addition to the survival horror formula. But most of all, and I'm not going to give away too many spoilers here, is the sanity system. So you have a green meter that represents your sanity, which is basically your fear. So when you see an enemy or engage an enemy, you initially scares you, you fight them, you defeat them, and you gain some of it back. But if you don't gain enough of it back, whether it be through defeating enemies or using spells to heal it, it gets too low. Let's just say things start to happen, and it's really interesting, and you really want to check this out. The combat, while it feels a bit stilted at first, is certainly better than Silent Hill, maybe not quite as good as Resident Evil, but very good. You select different body parts to attack, or just do a straight combo. You have guns, you have melee weapons, you have all sorts of things at your disposal, but it is a survival horror, so you don't have unlimited ammo. But you're also able to incorporate magic into this, exposing enemies' weaknesses, so everything is intuitive and in-depth. The story is so in depth and there's so much detail here that there are certain cutscenes that there are 3 versions of each, depending on which path you take. And depending on which path you take, there's a different god that's the enemy in the story, and that changes depending on which one you take. And you're able to watch these from the main menu and see all the different versions in replay. And there are these autopsy logs that you're able to listen to as an option to describe the enemies, and they are fascinating to listen to with this incredible performance from one of the main characters that you're able to play as you hear his descent into madness as he's describing these monsters that he's seeing and writing them down and documenting them.
They are amongst us. I knew they would come after me, for I knew their devices, their depraved methods, creatures wearing human skins as we wear clothes to cover their hideousness from our eyes.
I mean, this game just has it all. This is one of the best first-generation games on a console I've ever played. It's one of my favorite GameCube games. I've always loved this game. It's easily my top 5 survival horror games of all time. It really is a piece of art. This is one of those games where you're like, are games art or are they not art? Well, Eternal Darkness, I would say, makes a very, very easy case of games are art. And next we have an absolute racing classic, Mario Kart Double Dash, developed and released by Nintendo. So it goes without saying, the current Mario Kart on the Nintendo Switch is pretty much considered the king of Mario Karts with all of its graphics, gameplay, and options. But what sets this Mario Kart apart from all the other ones is the fact that you have 2 drivers per kart. Whether it be single player where you're controlling both and you're changing them back and forth using the Z button, playing co-op where the one player's in the front and the other's in the back throwing items and bumping players, 4 players where you have 2 against 2. There's many possibilities here, so there's a lot of variety. Also, you're able to mix and match in various combinations that you want. For example, you put TOTU in the front, Koopa in the back, and because they're medium class drivers, that gives you access to medium cars. You select which kart that you want. And because every character has their own special item, in this case, Toad has random mushrooms, Koopa has random shells. So that's your arsenal, that's your setup. And you can mix and match and experiment with different ones. You can have Baby Mario with Big Bowser and a big vehicle. You can pretty much do whatever you want. There's a lot of strategy involved there. It's very fun. The game is very fast, 60 FPS, 480p, progressive scan, widescreen presentation. So the game looks and runs fantastic. The levels here are fun and challenging. And yes, the computer, I'm not going to lie, does get very tough when you put it on 150. So if you want a challenge, you'll find a challenge here. This game is pretty tough. At the time, this redefined what Mario Kart was, which is crazy because they pretty much left some of the mechanics in this behind. And since it's not on anything else, this is the only way to go back and revisit this game. So if you're a Mario Kart fan and you happen to have never gotten around to Mario Kart Double Dash and you want a Mario Kart that's got something about it that's unique from the others, Double Dash will absolutely give you that. This is a special edition with this bonus demo disc, so I got a hold of that just as a collector. But yeah, any copy of Double Dash you can get a hold of and play on your GameCube or Wii, you should absolutely check it out. It's a fantastic game. And next we have Serious Sam Next Encounter. Developed by Climax Solent and released by Global Star Software. I've always been a really big fan of the Serious Sam franchise because I'm a big fan of Doom and Duke Nukem 3D, which this is directly inspired by. Sam himself as a character is really goofy, full of one-liners, totally a throwback to Duke Nukem, and the style of action in the game and the type of gunplay and enemies is like a cartoonish Doom. But this basically takes what Doom and Duke Nukem did, turns it up to 11 with massive environments, tons of enemies, explosive action. I mean, these games are always over the top and a lot of fun, especially in co-op. Now, what separates Next Encounter from the rest of the series is the fact that it only came out on the GameCube and PS2. Now, I refer to this as a GameCube game because honestly, it is far superior to the PS2 port. Now, the PS2 port is serviceable if that's all you have, but the GameCube version has twice the frame rate and vastly superior water effects. This is actually a very attractive game. While it doesn't have any video options like the previous games with their progressive scans, this still looks pretty good, even though it's on the blurry side. So for those that aren't aware, you have Serious Sam 1, 2, 3, and 4, which have all had various types of re-releases on different consoles and platforms. In this case, being only on GameCube and PS2, this is the black sheep of the group. And for fans of Serious Sam that may not have played it, or even newcomers alike, I would argue this is one of the best Serious Sams. It's very fun to pick up and play. I always enjoy playing it. Capturing gameplay, I was just having fun, just sitting there playing it, getting back into it again. So yeah, Serious Sam Next Encounter, I've always had fun with this game for many years. There's also a vehicle segment in the game. It's not that big of a deal, but it's a nice extra touch. Weapon designs are good. You know, the animation, everything about it's solid. I've always really liked this game. It's very fun, very ambitious too. So, and it really does kind of, in its own right, it pushes the GameCube to a pretty fair limit in its graphical capability. So yeah, Serious Sam, newcomers and veterans alike, you should check this out. And next, we have a classic franchise on Nintendo, Star Fox Assault, developed by Namco and released by Nintendo. Look, let's be real. Star Fox on the Super Nintendo, my personal favorite. Star Fox on the Nintendo 64, most people's favorite, are legendary Nintendo games that are probably not going to be bested anytime soon within the franchise, outside of the likes of something as good as Metroid Prime coming up. But I think Namco did a pretty dang respectable job here of making a solid Star Fox game. It looks great, it plays really nice, it's faithful to the formula for the most part. The voice acting here is serviceable and fits the tone of the characters in the game. It's just the little things and subtleties and designs that were masterclass of its time for the original games that this doesn't quite match, but it's still really good. And it's still stuck on the GameCube, so I think it's worth talking about and I think it's worth playing. What helps the nice presentation, it has progressive scan, so it looks really sharp, nice and widescreen. Everything you would expect from Star Fox, the flying around, the locking on to enemies. The part that kind of throws you for a loop, that some may love it, some may hate it, some may be okay with it, are the ground segments. Now in Star Fox 64, it introduced the tank, which was actually very cool. And Star Fox 2, that was never officially released until the Super Nintendo Mini, was going to have those ground segments via transforming our wing into a walker. So due to that, it wasn't until the Nintendo 64 that we were introduced to ground segments, hence why Namco decided, let's go ahead and flesh this out for this game now that we're in the 6th generation. All the way to the point where you're running around on foot as the pilot, shooting down stuff with hand weapons. Now, I appreciate the weapon variety and all that, and it looks and plays fine, but there's a few problems here. While one control scheme, the single stick method, works great for flying around and shooting, I didn't care for it on the ground. There's a dual analog method you can use, but then you're stuck with a dual analog method for everything, which I don't like because then you're having to use the right trigger to shoot. Unfortunately, they made it where the controls are one size fits all. You choose one control scheme, that's what you use for everything in the game, unless you go in and manually change it. You should have been able to go in and choose what controls you have for one on the ground and what controls you have while in the air. They didn't make it interchangeable. It's one size fits all, and that's really annoying. Now that I think about it, it is a bit of a negative for me, actually, with the ground segments, I have to admit, because now when I think about the boss battle from the ground segment, I realized how the boss battle made the design of the game rear its ugly head compared to the original boss battles of the original games. Because the original boss battles in those games were awesome. You looked forward to getting to boss battles in that game. They were epic. In this one, it was slow, boring, and a chore and annoying. It took way too long. It was way too frustrating. Not particularly hard. It was just annoying. And along with that, with these ground segments, is how these segments just kill the pacing. Normally, Star Fox games are breakneck speed pacing because these are pretty much just on-rail shooters, so the momentum never really stops. The momentum crashes with these ground segments, and that is not Star Fox design. Like I said, I actually do have a negative view on the ground segment overall because while on paper it sounds like a good idea, in actuality, it kills the pacing of the game and it just didn't work. It makes it where this game could have been like an 8 or 9, and it brings it down to about a 7. So while not perfect, absolutely worth checking out, though. This is a solid game. It is a pretty much non-Nintendo take on Star Fox, because this is Namco, it's not Nintendo developing it, but I think they did a pretty good job here. It's worth checking out, and it looks great. It actually really does show off what the GameCube is capable of. And finally, we have Super Smash Bros. Melee, developed by HAL Laboratory and released by Nintendo. Well, of course, it goes without saying, the first Smash Bros. On the Nintendo 64 is where it started, and there are many people that's their favorite entry in the franchise. But it wasn't until Melee that it launched into the stratosphere. The fan base is so passionate to the point where each year they lobby to have it at EVO, which is the largest fighting game tournament in the world, where they have GameCube controllers on CRT televisions so that they have zero input lag and fight each other at a high level. This game has a really passionate following. So that's what's interesting about this, how to this day it's still only on the GameCube. They've never done anything else with it other than, of course, the updated Smash Brothers games where it has all the same characters and everything. But of course, those have a certain feel to them. Those have different nerfs and buffs to them. So they are different. This game stands alone at this point. But aside from all that, this is just a phenomenal game, whether it be by yourself or with other players, any which way you want to play in all the various modes, adventure mode, co-op modes, platforming and earning points, unlocking trophies. There's so much memorabilia here. If you're a fan of Nintendo franchises, there is so much to explore here, and all the different trophies and how detailed they are, which was mind-blowing at the time. And all the descriptions you read of them, learning Nintendo history of all the different characters across many franchises. This is where things went hardcore with all that detail. The super polished graphics and mechanics and controls. I mean, this game is a AAA polished, expertly crafted game. I played the living daylights out of this until I locked each and every trophy in the game, and it was a lot of fun. This was one of the early GameCube games I ever played, and this is what, like Eternal Darkness, helped me fall in love with the GameCube. All right, well, that was 5 GameCube games that are pretty much still stuck on the GameCube or Wii, if you have a Wii with GameCube guts in it. Some of these I really wish they were able to re-release in some form or another, at the very least digitally, so that we're able to experience these games, revisit them again, play them for the first time in a lot of cases. Because if you're a Smash Brothers Ultimate fan, this is actually really interesting to go back and play. Because there's things in this that Ultimate doesn't quite have in terms of how you look at the trophies and their descriptors and everything. So if you're a hardcore fan of Nintendo and Melee, this is still worth going back to. I hope you liked the video. Please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it, and have a blessed day.